Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Alexandra, and this channel is focused on helping you tap more and more into your heart, align with your heart, and through your heart, connect with your higher self, your guides, the universe, the God, Goddess, all that is, and become your own guide, your own teacher, your own healer. And basically, my intention is to always provide you with light language transmissions and new concepts, new tools, and also share channeled messages with you that might inspire you, enlighten you, and help you on your journey. For those of you that have been following me and are part of the Heart Tribe, thank you so much for coming back and being part of my journey. And in case any of you have just stumbled across my channel or may have never heard of light language before, I suggest you go back to the second video that I posted on this channel, which is called Light Language Explained, so you can have a bit of an idea of what I'm about to do and what the purpose of light language is, how it can benefit you, and what to expect from it, basically. And as always, I am going to channel light language for you today. This video is part of the Healing Love series. I already made 2 videos that are going to be in the playlist of the Healing Love series, starting with the moment when I post more videos on this topic. I am going to make playlists so you guys can find whatever you need in an easier way in the near future. The first video relating to this Healing Love series was about clearing blocks to a true love and clearing any, definitions of love that are not aligned with, divine truth, let's say, because many of us in our culture also many times has a distorted definition of love. For example, love is blind, love hurts, or thoughts regarding self-love, like I have to be this way in order to love myself, or I have to be this way in order to be loved by others. So if you haven't watched that, I suggest you go back and watch that for sure, because that's the base of the Healing Love series. And then the next video was Healing Relationships 1, and it was all about attachment styles and how we connect to others, and how that's connected to our parental relationships, and how we kind of are in like a relationship trance, I would say, where if we don't work on ourselves and heal ourselves and forgive and let go and do all the self-work, basically we basically kind of are always unconsciously looking for the same energy in others that we had at home with our own parents. And in the best case, obviously, if we had an amazing relationship with our parents, most of us will develop a secure attachment and will probably easily find somebody that they can have, let's say, a very satisfying, fulfilling relationship. But in most cases, we do grow up with parents that have their own issues. There are many kind of things that can happen, which can lead to, let's say, more difficult attachment styles. And so when we get older and go out into the world, we will unconsciously attract the same dysfunctional pattern, and thus kind of like perpetuating that wound that was inflicted onto us in our childhood. So that is also a very important element to look at when we want to heal our relationship and our love in our life. And the topic that I'm going to go into today is healing the divine feminine wound. And what I mean by that is that a lot of us, it doesn't matter if we are male or female or actually any gender we identify with, doesn't matter, but everybody on this planet and everybody on many other planets, let's say, have a feminine and a masculine energy within them. We are the embodiment of that yin and yang, let's say. And so when I talk about the divine feminine wound, what I mean by that is that we may experience different things in our lives that may kind of like put us in a state where we disconnect from our own feminine, where we judge the feminine. And I'm not talking about women, I'm talking about the feminine energy. And besides our own individual issues that we can develop with the feminine energy, we are also going to be clearing the whole disbalance around the feminine energy regarding our collective history. So if we look at the world today and we look at the history of our world, we have been living in a patriarchy for a very long time. And so just today I was listening to a very good friend of mine. He has a Spotify channel called Leseminuten. If any of you is German, you probably just understood what I said, but basically it's like reading minutes where he reads from different books. So if any of you guys speak German, you can check him out, Leseminuten on Spotify. He has an amazing voice and reads out of many amazing books. And I was listening to him this morning, and he was talking about how come there's so many male writers and less women writers. And he looked at the history, our collective history, and made a few very important points, I thought, which were, for example, that men were the ones that were allowed to actually study for a very long time in history, whereas women were not. So obviously this divide in the roles that we were allowed to embody were expected of us to embody throughout our collective history created some kind of disbalance between the feminine and the masculine, which is obviously getting more and more balanced today. Since we are basically in most of the parts of the world allowed to do more or less the same things. But we are still in a process of healing that divine feminine wound. And obviously there is also a divine masculine wound, which I'm also going to get into in a different video. But yeah, he was mentioning how men were the first ones that were allowed to study. And so because of that intellectual advancement or a leg up, let's say, that's why they were also allowed to write books the first, right? Whereas women were considered, not as not being intellectual or, knowledgeable enough to write anything, right? So this is just one example of this patriarchal system that we've been living in. And so we are going to get into the personal wounds that we have with the feminine as well as the collective wounds that we have with the feminine. And before I get into that, I also want to give an example from my own personal life, which might, resonate with some of you, hopefully. And that is that basically I grew up with my father and my grandmother because my parents separated when I was very young. And it was a very traumatizing experience for everybody, basically, but it's obviously especially for myself and my mother. And it was not necessarily something that she chose herself. It was just out of the circumstances. And I don't want to get into it too much because these are also their stories and not only mine, so I don't want to invade their privacy. But basically, what happened was that the future relationships my father had later on were the relationships which he chose, and that is his choice, and there's no judgment from my side regarding that. But I did sometimes have the feeling that certain women were kind of like trying to have him for themselves and were feeling a bit, let's say, threatened by my presence. So there was always a feeling for me, at least the way I interpreted the events that happened with different women, was that I did have a feeling that they were trying to kind of push me out. There was a feeling of them trying to grab on, to my father. And yeah, as I said, push me out, and also kind of like a backstabbing energy. So growing up without my physical mother, my biological mother, even though I had my grandmother who was lovely and wonderful and God bless her, there was naturally a separation in my case from my own feminine, in a sense, because of not growing up with my mother, even though we did see each other, and it wasn't like the connection was completely lost, but still it does leave an imprint on you, right? And then that was the number one wound, let's say. And then later on, there were these experiences with my father's partners, which were also not always easy. Um, and so, because of these judgments, let's say, that I had, or programs that I took on about the feminine energy being something that is maybe a little bit backstabbing or just not very clear, and maybe a bit manipulative, looking at those partners that he had, not that they really were, that was just my interpretation as a child, right? So that's just how I perceived my reality in that moment, connected to these women. So because of these thoughts that I had and grew up with, I generally had a lot of distrust towards the women. I did not appreciate the overly feminine energy, like, I'm just going to give a very visual example. Like, I would not like the whole unicorn, I don't know, pink, Barbie, I don't know, kind of energy that is associated with the feminine energy, or women or girls in our society. I had a very strong resistance towards that, and I kind of like developed a more of an acceptance towards the masculine energy, because it just felt safer to me. I had the feeling that men or boys are just more clear in their intentions. And looking back now, I think that on a certain level, men maybe, because they are not so overly emotional, the majority of them, let's say, compared to women, there is a high possibility that men actually do speak in more clearer ways and express themselves in a clearer way, so that it is most of the time easier to understand their intention. That said, obviously, this is only the case if there's not a lot of trauma and whatever involved in their life, and they are in a more stable and healed place. Whereas women can be more emotional at times and can respond, react, and behave in a more emotional way, which can manifest in many ways, but it can definitely be, or make understanding their intentions a bit difficult for a little child, as I was at that time, and generally for other people. So this is not a label or a judgment on my end. I'm just trying to make you understand what place I'm talking from. So because of this wound that I had with the feminine energy, I obviously had girls as friends, but there was always kind of like a protective layer there, and always a bit of lack of trust towards the feminine energy. And the universe really provided me later on in my teenage years with amazing, amazing women in my life, very, very strong women that were both, developed in their feminine and masculine, and that were kind of like my guides somehow, to a certain degree, teaching me about the world, and kind of, educating me in many things. And so that kind of healed a lot of that wound that I had. And later on, when I was around like 18, I guess, I just got this guidance from the universe, my higher self, that I should make it an exercise to really find something. It could be anything. It could be the smile, the hair, clothes, whatever. It could have been anything, but basically make it a exercise to find something that I appreciate in every woman that I see as I'm walking down the street, or on the subway or whatever. So I just started doing that for myself, within myself, and really trying, as I said, to find something I appreciate in each and every single woman that I would see. And that helped me really generate this energy of appreciation, and helped me connect more to the feminine energy within myself and within other women. And then the second level that they guided me to move to was basically to really express that appreciation. And that was a very interesting experience for myself and the women that I expressed it towards. Because, yeah, as I mentioned in previous videos, I spent a lot of my life in Germany, and I'm currently living in Germany. And I do think that I don't want to, be judgmental here or put labels, but I do think that the German culture is maybe not as emotional as, let's say, I don't know, France, Italy, or Spain, I think people are more for themselves here compared to other countries. And I could notice it also in the reaction of the women at that time, because obviously I wouldn't act like, some creep and just walk up to somebody and be like, hey, you're so beautiful or something. But, like if I would get into a conversation with somebody, even if it was for the first time, if I felt that it was the right moment and the energy was okay, I would share my exploration of appreciation towards them. And most of them were absolutely not used to receiving any type of appreciation, especially not from women. And so actually a lot of them cried tears of joy, but also healing tears, I guess, because it completely overwhelmed them. And I do believe that there is a layer in our culture where women have the tendency to compare themselves with other women, or judge other women. And we have a tendency to be jealous, and to, sometimes be in this toxic feminine energy, this toxic expression of the divine feminine. And so many of us kind of like pull each other down because of our toxic feminine energy, instead of helping each other, raise ourselves, right, on our soul path for this incarnation. So it was a very healing experience for me, as well as for them, for me to allow myself to express that appreciation towards them, but also for them to receive it. And on the other end, last year I was in Belgium with a very dear soul sister of mine and spent some time there. And I remember I was at a meeting with expats there in Brussels, and there was a group of women talking, and my friend introduced me to them, and a lot of them were working in a scientific field. And I just said, I'm so happy to meet you. You're all so beautiful. And beautiful for me is not something that's necessarily physical. There is obviously physical beauty, but there is soul beauty. There is a beauty in the way somebody chooses their words and expresses. There's a beauty in the simple presence of a person, even if they don't do anything and they just sit there. There's a beauty in the way somebody looks at you, right? Like there's so many things that beauty could represent, or where the word beauty could be used. And I was using it much more on the level of their presence, basically. But it was very interesting how they reacted to that. Being that two of them were immediately very irritated by me, because, and they kind of explained it, and I'm obviously just going to explain it in my own words now. But basically what they meant was that they don't appreciate a compliment like that, because if they're complimented for their beauty, that means that their intellect is not being valued, which I also understand. But that would be another example of the feminine wound, where we as women, or also as men, because as I said before, we all have both, feel that one aspect within ourselves, in this video being the feminine, as that's what we're talking about, is not as valuable as the masculine side. So when we talk about the intellect, the rational mind, that is our left brain, and it is our more connected to the masculine energy, right? So those women were obviously on a deeper subconscious level valuing or putting more focus on their masculine energy than their feminine. And meeting me and me appreciating their beauty for them meant that I'm appreciating more of their feminine qualities, which for them were just not as valuable. So this is another example of how the feminine wound can manifest itself. So I'm going to get into the transmission now. So this transmission is going to be for clearing the collective as well as the individual wound of the divine feminine, as well as clearing all the past life experiences in which that you had, in which your own divine feminine energy was wounded, either by yourself or others, and also clearing, really clearing all the beliefs and programs on all aspects of the mind, conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, that can lead or led to this wound and this divide within the self and the collective. With the divine feminine, really healing those wounds, healing all those aspects within all layers of your being, and really, let's say, activating and bringing forward that divine feminine energy within you, in case you are the type of person that may have pushed it aside a little bit in order to function in our society, which is not something that is very unique, because our society, at least in the Western world, is very dominated by the masculine energy. And so many of us are not used to expressing that, or took on the collective 3D programming of that patriarchal influence we've been having. And so many of us are not feeling comfortable with the divine feminine, are not feeling comfortable expressing it, living it, or we are just stuck in this masculine energy of like doing, being, doing something, kind of like penetrating society, climbing up the ladder. So all of these kind of like, let's say, linear ways of thinking, right? Moving forward or moving upward. These are all kind of like more masculine traits. So when we look at the CEOs and the whole corporate culture, it is very masculine, right? And that is not only in the corporate culture, that's generally in most of the workspace in our modern society. So out of all of these reasons and many more, most of us separated from our divine feminine, or are not feeling comfortable with it, are not embodying it, or may have huge judgments towards it, be it, if I am in my feminine, I'm going to be hurt, I'm going to be weak, people are going to see me as weak, people are going to walk all over me, I'm going to get sexually abused, I'm not going to be taken serious, I'm going to be lazy and too passive, right? Because the feminine energy is more connected to the being aspect of ourselves and not the doing. The doing is the masculine aspect. Or if I am in my feminine, what else? I'm not going to be functioning properly in the world, or I'm not going to be functioning properly within my own family unit, and many, many other things. So we're basically going to be clearing all these types of aspects, as well as any karma and trauma you've suffered in your past lives regarding the feminine, and any wounds that you have suffered or inflicted onto your own self by separating yourself from it. And as I always say, drink a lot of water with this transmission. You are always welcome to watch my transmissions, any of them, more times, and I actually do suggest that you do watch all of them a couple of times. In my own sessions, I always tell people that the light language transmissions that I send them, people can book light language transmissions for their own self, unique and individualized to their own topics that they want to clear. So usually I tell people to listen to the transmission that I record and send to them every morning and every evening for at least 7 days. But obviously you can use the tools that I'm offering to you the way you feel guided to, and in a way that resonates for you, right? So we're going to get into the transmission now. Hunara ne hikiria tahara huru eri arak tushetiri ataka. Tikiria na huneiera ya huru tukuria tikiti. Tikiria shetene ya na huru otere kiti arakata ene yana. Huriata shatikiria tate yara huru tukuru e tikira takarati ene ya. Usutria tikite arakata ane yana huklu dudi arakta ya. Tikiria ne yana na huru ya titi arakata anaya. Uusutria tikira takana kutukutu ereketikia tekira arakati shitria tiki. Eia na rahuno ya nene ya ne ya hara ya uruturu. Unne ya ne heria kutuusutria tiki arakta ere ya ne ya na huru ne ya kishitria taka. Ashatria ra kuru tu te ereketiria ne ya kuru tu ne ya na hakuru te heria. Uria keteria ashatria ki ya tata ya ne ya kuru tu ya tiki shitria taka. Uusutria tiki ne ya kere kuru tu eki ya rahata. Neja nana unu keshitria te kuturi kiti ya taka airea kiria kata unu. Neja nana ne urukti iria takasha te hara tututure te kete te kiria tata haneja na. Neja na nunu neshiti ia kata urukututu. Tikiria neja ruru te neja nana hara neja kurukute. Us neja nena urukutu unu ya kiti ya te ka ataku urukutu unu. Neja na ure ya na hairia tata haurukutu urututu ene kiti ya. Ishitria taknaya hurukt uneania hana hunununu. Nea na huru te yakata ashatria tikiti arakata. Usutria tikite anaya kane ya na hunu nea nea. No yorunu nea hakarate ya takeria kitikiti ya kurukutushite ya ore te yakata. Tikiria takutusutu kiria tata unea na. Nea na nuru nunu etia takara tu ya hatakare tikiti arakutushite ya tikiti. Uusutria teketa atakarakatida na nea na ununea. Tutte te yakata anea na huru tutu eteke shitiki ataka. Urea kutushutiria teke yakiti ata enea hukututu eri yakata. Tuke te anea ununu enea na eshitiki ataka. Te yara kuru te yakata haere yata unea enea na unu ene. Nea na uru yatakata eri yakata. Uusutria nea hara iria teke yata o te kiti tiria kata nea na no ya ne. So I hope this transmission is really going to be helpful for you in healing your own wound with the divine feminine. I wish you all the best. I wish that, this transmission and all the transmissions that I'm offering and in general, anything that you're experiencing is always going to bring you more and more deeper into your heart's true essence and help you radiate it out into the world from a place of balance between all polarities, especially the feminine and the masculine. I wish you all the best, and I'm going to see you soon. Bye.